In this video, we'll be talking about some underrated albums from the year 1995. I'm continuing my series of underrated albums of the 90s, and this year had a few albums that were some maybe considered bad albums, but I'll get to those when I get to them. But as always, I divided this video into chapters. Feel free to jump to the band you want to hear about. I have 5 albums, so let's get right into it. So the first one is Forbidden by Black Sabbath, released on June 5th, 1995. Now, this is usually considered to be like their worst album, but in my opinion, I think it does have some quality to it. The main thing people say about this album was it was produced by Body Count, specifically Ernie C. And one of the songs features Ice-T doing a rap, which is very like un-Black Sabbath-like. But it's an album with Tony Martin on vocals. I like it because it was an album I listened to a lot. I used to have like an MP3 version of this on my MP3 player, and I used to listen to it a lot while I was traveling. So I know the songs very well, and they're just very catchy. It's not the best Black Sabbath album ever, but I wouldn't say it's the worst. So we got songs like Illusion of Power, what I was talking about. That's the most like Black Sabbath sounding song with the heavy doom metal riffs, and that one has Ice-T doing a short rap on it. But a couple of other ones are really good that I like. Can't Get Close Enough. That's just a good solid rock song. Pretty laid back, but Tony Martin has some decent vocals in that one. I Won't Cry for You. It's a ballad, but it's a memorable song. And there are other parts of the album where sound a little more like maybe glam metal, like Rusty Angels, but other stuff more like arena rock, like I Won't Cry for You and Guilty as Hell. I think if you give this album a chance, you can get into it. The production is maybe a little thin. So like I'm saying, I'm not saying it's a great album, but I don't think it's as horrible as some people say it is. So that's my first underrated pick, Black Sabbath with Forbidden. Next is Mad Season with Above, released on March 14, 1995, through Columbia Records, and super underrated. It's a grunge supergroup featuring Lane Staley on vocals. Includes members of Pearl Jam, specifically Mike McCready on guitars. This one had a big hit, River of Deceit, back in 1995. It's a really great song, very like Alice in Chains, kind of unplugged type of song, something you would hear on either like Sap or Jar of Flies. But then they had another single called I Don't Know Anything. Another one that's more Alice in Chains like, but kind of like a heavier song that would appear on maybe like the Dirt album. But the rest of the album, it doesn't sound anything like Alice in Chains. It's more like 90s grunge. They got some acoustic rock, some jazz, and lots of good songs. This is a solid album. We have Wake Up. It's a little more ambient and has some more classic like psychedelic rock elements. X-Ray Mind is a little more grungy with some 60s rock. And that one was pretty cool. Reminded me of like Saigon Kick with some cool like Santana style drum beats. I Am Above is kind of like a Pearl Jam song, but with classic rock, but with a 90s sound. And Long Day Gone, that one I like a lot. I think that one was a big influence on that band, Days of the New. It has that like acoustic grunge sound. So overall, great album. Next is Rammstein with Herzeleid. There was their debut album released September 25th, 1995 on Motor Records. It gets overlooked because they became popular with their following album, which was the one with Du Hast, and this one's pretty solid. It has lots of good songs, and the album is just fairly heavy. So we got Der Meister, very heavy industrial kind of sound, and just classic style, great vocals by Lindemann, and just great guitars. Asche Su Asche, really great song, nice mix of the electronics and the heavy guitars. And Till Lindemann, just really great vocals. This is a band they've like never really changed that much. They kind of altered the style a little bit, but this is a heavy album. It had the ballad Seaman, very dark and emotional, has like a different like vocal style. Harate Mich, dark tone with some funky electronic beats and some heavy guitar riffs. Overall, great album. Next is 6 Feet Under with Haunted. This is a band that gets a lot of hate. They're like the Nickelback of death metal. It's a band that was started by Chris Barnes after he left Cannibal Corpse. It was started as a side project, but they became a full band. They're from Tampa, Florida. like many other death metal bands, they're also one of the most popular death metal bands. They're actually like the fourth best-selling death metal band in the U.S. and they get a lot of hate. I think like their last album, Nightmare of the Decomposed, was like really bad, and people just like make fun of that album, and it was pretty bad. I remember when it came out, I didn't really listen to it, but I saw all the reviews of it. But this album, I think it's pretty good. It's kind of like death metal, but it's like death metal light. It's a little more accessible. I think the best songs are like Lycanthropy, has like machine gun riffing, a cool drum beat, and a little more melodic, a little more catchy. Other good song is Human Target. Got some memorable guitars, angry vocals like human target, something like that. Very great chorus. And it's a band, their discography is not consistent, but I think this album and maybe some of their early ones are like okay. So I think that's why I wanted to talk about that. And I'm going to talk about one more, and that's going to be Skid Row with Subhuman Race. So released on March 28th, 1995. This was the last album with Sebastian Bach. And it's just very underrated. It doesn't really get the same attention that their first two albums got. And it was released at a time when glam bands were kind of dying out, so they were either going in like a grunge or a metal direction. And this album has a lot of those influences. A little bit of grunge, a little bit of groove metal, some punk, some thrash. But I think they did it like very well. This is one of those bands where they like were able to pull it off. You hear influences from like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Ministry, some Pantera. Maybe the heaviest album. So we got the opening track, My Enemy. You got the heavy guitars, a nice groove. Sebastian Bach, really great vocals. He sounds angrier, but he still retains his style. Then we got Bonehead. That's like the heaviest song ever. It's like thrash metal, or kind of like thrash and punk. It's a short 2-minute song, just very fast and energetic. They have a ballad called Eileen. They have some grunge elements. Maybe not as good as their other ballads on their first two albums, but it's a pretty good song. And the title track, you got elements of like early Metallica mixed with that like Slave to the grind sound. And then the song Frozen, that's cool, like a Soundgarden style kind of guitar riff on that one. Overall, super underrated album. I've heard lots of other channels just give this one lots of praise. So that's it for this video. I'll be back maybe next week. I'll do 1996, talking about some underrated albums. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.